Welcome to the Private AI Lab, the podcast where we experiment, explore, and debate the future of AI behind the firewall. I'm your host, Johan, and every month I have a guest over in the lab to break down real-world use cases, challenges, and innovations shaping private AI. In this month's episode, I wanted to kind of dive into the world of sovereignty, sovereign AI. To do that, I invited Eric Lajoie over. He's an AI specialist at SUSE, and he has a lot of really cool ideas about the topic. So let's start with the episode. So, welcome to the first experiment. And in this experiment of the very first show, I invited Eric Lajoie over. Eric, to me, is someone I've worked with for a while now. This time, I didn't hammer his name because it is very challenging. Like if you look at your surname, it's very challenging to kind of figure out how to pronounce it. But Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How often do you hear people kind of hammer your name?
Oh, the Americans like to say Lajoie. The Germans do as well. The French, of course, say it like you did, like Lajoie. If I said it in my home country, it was Lajoie. But even they called me Lovejoy because it was an author back then that they always mix up. So it's been everywhere. But yeah.
Man. So Eric, you're an AI specialist at SUSE.
Trying to be.
And
yes.
Can you just briefly explain what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I'm a regional specialist. So I go out and with account teams that have customers or partners, and I show them what we have and the value we bring. But more often, I'm listening to business cases and use cases that those customers and partners have, and trying to see if there's value that SUSE can bring to them in whatever they're trying to do. Things like sovereign AI, private AI. A lot of the governments and public sector are looking at doing AI air-gapped for whatever use cases they have. And I'm usually doing proof of concepts for some with a larger extended team. But in any case, it's always AI. And in the case of SUSE versus my previous company, it's mainly private AI as we get it more into our MLOps approaches.
So unlike I would say a regular kind of like sales specialist or specialist in your role is part of a sales team, but you're very hands-on with AI, right?
Yeah. I'm one of the few that can actually hit the keyboard and get things done, as well as actually talk about the business and the commercial aspect of what customers are trying to do. It's kind of a thin line between doing full lobotomy to sales, but also still being able to achieve things with your hands in a technical way. But yeah, it's fun.
So when was the kind of the first time that you got acquainted with our common friend AI?
That's interesting because I was in Red Hat. I was doing telco, and Telenor was one of my customers in this telco, and it's a separate vertical in Red Hat in there. And my customer decided to spend $5 to $6 billion on NVIDIA hardware, which correlates well with your T-shirt today. And that was it was a great kind of threshold from doing telco to doing AI. So the customer wanted to go down the AI journey. I was the only trusted technical advisor. I was an SA back then, which is a purely pre-sales but technical pre-sales. So that's where the keyboard time is coming from. And I helped them build out their multi-billion-dollar GPU as a service approach, and we found all the kind of loopholes because not many people had done it back then, a couple of years ago, and now they have a full-blown service in their country. It's called SkiGuard in Norway. It's a publicly announced AI platform where all the water cooling, for example, goes into the local town and municipality and does the heating in the winter partially. But yeah, that was my first exposure. And it was all GPU as a service, and eventually, this is before NeuroMagic was purchased back then in that company, and it was all basically trying to do the equivalent of DevOps, but ML ops with the machine learning side of things.
Well, I think that's also kind of a nice segue into, the first aspect of, or the first topic of this first experiment one, which I like to call the icebreaker. So what I'd like to do is ask you about your first or funniest AI fail.
Oh, well, first, there's a lot of first. If you stick at the end, the funniest I'd have to say, I had to think about this. And it actually happened last month. And part of my demos I do for customers, because usually you show them the value and talk about their use case and if they're qualified and having budget to buy the hardware, because it's usually greenfield, that kind of stuff. You do the demo. And one of my favorite demos is RAG training. So I usually go in and I find some files in my download that are just some random PDFs, and I upload them into our vector database and do the RAG training. I let the customer choose what model to use for it. And once that's done, we'll ask questions against this trained data. And I thought I had uploaded my phone bill into the RAG training data. When I asked the question, it turned out I'd actually uploaded my pay stub from the previous month. So the customer got to see what my pay stub was from the previous month. And I did get some questions about, maybe I should be an AI pre-sales person. So that was embarrassing, slightly funny, and I think the lesson learned is be careful what you train into your data.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so recognizable. Data is so important to, like, without data, AI is nothing. But feeding the wrong data into any AI solution will end up in a potential shitstorm.
Yeah. Which might segue good into when shit hits the fan. It's like another pattern.
Yeah, so what I'll do, because we had another like really fun conversation about AI, but about you is, I invited you over to one of the other podcasts I create, and what I'll do is leave a link into the show notes to that specific episode, because it was a lot of fun, and we talked about stuff going wrong. I still remember from that episode, it was in your case when shit did really hit the fan, had nothing to do with AI or IT at all, but with plumbing in your house now, and
I'm
it's
still
completely
alive.
Yeah. Well, it's a different story, and definitely something that our listeners and viewers should take a look at. So.
Yeah, so that was the most, let's say, maybe not the funniest, but that was the most awkward for me, because
Well, thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Now let's continue to experiment number 2, which I call the deep dive. So in the deep dive, we kind of dive into a topic of choice, something that obviously has to do with AI behind the firewall, and we already have kind of had a brief conversation about kind of the security aspect of it, but also, the fact that you work at SUSE. And to me, SUSE is one of the, I would say, leading companies when it comes to sovereignty, geopolitics, and how to kind of mitigate all of the geopolitic issues that currently are kind of happening in the IT and the AI space. And you guys have a solution called SUSE AI, so that's definitely also a topic that I'd kind of like to touch upon. But kind of let's start with the basics. The show is called the Private AI Lab. What does Private AI mean to you?
Ooh, well, before I get there, maybe I say what SUSE actually is, because a lot of the AI events I go to these days, I've been with SUSE about a year now. People think SUSE is a Linux company, right? So SUSE was founded in 1992, has about 2,500 people working, originally from Germany. Right now, Luxembourg is the headquarters, so it's a European-based company, which is quite, let's say, rare for Linux and Kubernetes. And SUSE has, like you said, SUSE AI, which implies there's Kubernetes there and the whole IT stack, right? When it comes to SUSE AI, the first and foremost thought on the product from our side was sovereign AI. So SUSE makes an AI platform that can run in an air-gapped environment. It provides a bunch of different use cases out of the box. We have like a chatbot use case. We have code assistance use cases. We also have machine learning for some of our retail and manufacturing customer base. And that's really where we started. And where we're going in FY26, which we can get to in the recap or even in this section, is around basically providing a bleeding edge approach for some customers. So we have something called our app collection, which is kind of like an application repository when you're using our multi Kubernetes cluster management called Rancher. And you have the whole AI stack in there, where everything's CVE free and the product's always being updated to make sure things are patched. And then we have another approach which should be announced publicly by the BU in the next month or so, sometime in November, where we have all of this tech preview stuff. So you have things like Kubeflow and MLflow is already there. We have stuff like RayServe and other things. All these things our customer base are using, and instead of using community, they want to get the support from us. So that's where SUSE is going in the AI space. But to your question about private AI, a lot of the time customers are interested in, like what we talked about earlier, RAG training, being able to choose their own model, not needing to spend any time on training or model serving from the large scale approach, which you might see like we just released VLLM, which is more production grade versus OLAMA, those kind of things. So with the chatbot and the sovereign AI, it's a pretty much a canned thing that customers can just go with. They can install a single node out in their environment, like let's say municipalities in Netherlands. If each town wants to have their own AI experience on-prem, they'd take a single node, install the SUSE AI stack, and they could have a chatbot working out of the box, which would be all web-based, and they just kind of embed that in their town municipality website, or if it's as a SaaS serving option from like ITQ or some other company, it would be hosted through there. But that's kind of what we're doing on the RAG training and chatbot experience.
Now, you mentioned a couple of really interesting things. So one of the things that to me that really stands out from SUSE is the kind of the open ecosystem, and the fact that you mentioned Rancher, and Rancher is one of the kind of the Kubernetes management solutions that we see a lot in the market. I think it's one of the probably most used ones in the world. And yeah, talking about solutions that could live on top of that, or like Kubeflow, MLflow. Let's kind of briefly go into that, because Kubernetes needs to be managed. We'll do that through Rancher in those cases. But pipelines to create a model, to train a model, to validate a model, or to curate it, or to label data that needs to be put into a model. That's somebody need tools for that as well. So
a lot.
Let's talk about the SUSE AI aspect, or the ML kind of MLOps aspect of SUSE AI, and what you just briefly mentioned.
Yeah, so it's fairly new, and the way it's being approached is from the data scientist side. So if you look at what we had before November, it's been mainly around canned application approaches or use cases. And with the whole MLOps approach, we're slightly playing catch up to some of the other players in the field. And we're on the fence between Kubeflow and Ray and KubeRay / that. And basically, we're going to try and do both approaches. Initially, Ray's quite complicated, so we're looking at RayServe initially, because that's the only piece some of our customers are using. No one's really doing Ray train. But on the Kubeflow side and the MLflow side, they're tightly coupled. So we're using MLflow for model registry and dataset registry. And this really comes down to, if you and I are the data scientist, let's say we're writing in Python code, we'll have hooks in our Python code that point to the MLflow for pulling the data set over an S3 bucket. We'll have another link or Python, let's say, line of code in our code that will go and say where we're going to store the trained, let's say, experiment. And we might be using Jupyter Labs or notebooks, whatever we want to call them, or we might be using VS Code, whatever we're using to write this Python. At the end of the day, it's going to be sitting in Git, and then we're going to have a pipeline or an MLOps approach where you want to use Kubeflow to do the actual training. So the combination of having your code in Git, having Kubeflow do the actual training, or later on the model serving, and having the data set and the trained models sitting in a registry in MLflow. So it's kind of two tools that are going on at the same time. That's the current approach I'm seeing. The aspect it's not yet clear, and I'll find out more in November, is basically there's many components in Kubeflow. So outside of K-serve, whatever else is going to be needed is TBD as we work with our end customers on the tech preview side. Because the thing we don't want to do in RBU is have things that no one uses.
Yeah.
So, like for example, there's definitely going to be serverless and service mesh for the model serving part via K-serve, but outside of that, what's going to be extra? And maybe all the customers do serverless and we just forget the complexity of service mesh, for example.
And what about pipelines? Is that something that you want to consume the kind of the default Kubeflow component for that as well, or is that something that you kind of still looking at?
Right now, the GitOps approach in SUSE is with a tool called Fleet instead of Argo CD. So it's going to come down to, do we do it via Argo CD? Do we do it via Fleet, or we do something native in Kubeflow to do that? And right now, that's not clear for me, but that's one of the unknowns we have right now, or at least I have.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you kind of how would you guys decide which approach to go for? Is that something that you work with customers to figure that out, or
me or my BU that does the product? I would go to every customer and figure out which ones fit their need. And if I see there's a more than 50% kind of match, like let's say 80 to 90 on one way, I would advise my BU that this is the way, and these are the larger deals that need that way. And if we have like one customer who's got a really strong reason to use a separate way, then they either get something that's not fully supported, like Tech Preview, or they go on their own, because of course anything open source they can easily run on the SUSE platform. It's just a question of, are they going to want to have support from SUSE, and do they want to pay for that support? If it's one customer out of all of them wanting support for something and they're going to give you 5 million to do this, then of course the answer is going to be yes. But it all comes down to that business approach and customer demand.
Yeah, so one of the things I definitely also wanted to talk to you about is what you just kind of mentioned, right? So I'm in the Netherlands, and you mentioned municipalities as an example. They want to start with a chatbot, so SUSE AI is capable of deploying that on a single node. So kind of from start to finish, how simple is it to actually start with SUSE AI? What is necessary?
Well, I've been seeing a lot of misconception, and the biggest one I'm going to share with you is that customers think that when they do RAG training, they have to train it into a model, which means they need to have support from some vendor for that model. And a lot of people don't realize that you can do RAG training into a vector database, which means that you can download. So let's both discuss this piece, which is around parameters, right? If you get an 8 billion parameter model, it's got 8 billion parameters of data in that model trained. If you get a 200 billion parameter, it's got a whole lot more data trained in it. The way I look at it from a layman's term is, if you take both models and you tell them to write a one-page document in very good English about a resume or something, the more parameter model will actually give you a better sounding document, because it's got more source to build that on and more example. So when a customer goes in to do RAG training, I explain to them that, listen, you really want to have, like, the sweet spot's about 120 billion parameter based on some partners that are doing this as well. That's what I found out through kind of experience. So if the customer downloads any model with 120 billion parameters in it or more, which is around, I don't know, 90 gig of virtual video RAM. So you got to have like maybe an H100 or A6000. I think now they only go up to 24, but something that would fit that model, around 100 gig or more. And then you do RAG training into the vector database, you'll get the best experience versus going with a smaller model. But also the customer realizes that the polished look of the response they get is coming down to how big the model is they use for generating the response. It doesn't affect at all which vector database they use, because that model is going to pull from the vector database. Now, when you push into the vector database, there's a different model used to do the training into the RAG into the vector database. That one basically is where you tweak like how big you want the sections to overlap that you cut out of the markdown converted document. But let's say you and I have like 100 a data source with 100 files in it. Doesn't matter what format they are. They'll get converted to markdown, cut up into chunks depending on what your RAG training config file is inside of, in our case, OpenWebUI, or it could be Langflow. And then basically that data is sitting in the vector database. And when the customers realize, okay, I don't have to pay for model support, I can use any model I want, And if I use something like SUSE security, I can actually block everything off. Because a lot of the demos on the other side, on the security side, which we haven't gone to yet, I've seen that when you use any models on top of OLAMA or VLLM, you'll actually see it reach out to api.openai.com. So I'm not sure why, but a lot of those models are actually calling home to different public web interfaces. I don't know if it's sending metadata. It's all SSL encrypted or TLS encrypted. So I'd have to put a sidecar in there to figure out, and I never did. But that's part of the thing is, let me recap. So you have your vector database, you have your model. The data that's actually responded back from the RAG training is coming out of the vector database, but the polishedness of that response is based on how big the LLM you choose is for that. And it can be any LLM that's trained on general web data or whatever, which most of them are. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, kind of. And but that's kind of the AI side of things, right? So, I mean, if you want to start with the whole solution, you need to kind of build it up from the kind of the ground up. A customer gets a box, and the box is empty. Mm-hmm. And now what? So how simple is it kind of to start with, first of all, kind of the base layer, the infrastructure layer, which probably means some OS. On top of that, we need something to manage it, and on top of that, you get kind of the AI stack that lives there. So, kind of how simple is it to kind of kickstart with SUSE AI?
A day in the life of installing SUSE AI and using it. I like that. Okay.
Kind of, yeah. So sounds good.
Let's say we got HPE. No offensive on Dell or Lenovo or any of them. We log into their ILO or whatever it is, and we plug in a USB stick with the OS. Let's say SLES or Sleep Micro, one of our Linux distros. You install that in the bare metal. Don't have to have network connectivity, although it'd be nice if you did, because then you can easily get stuff like the models like you want, updates. Yeah. Once SLES is installed, you install the driver for the video card. If it's AMD or NVIDIA, you get the driver from that vendor and install it. That driver needs to match the one that you need to use with their operator. Each one has their own GPU operator. And I'm keeping it simple. There's other operators from those, especially NVIDIA when it comes to other things. But once that driver's installed, you install RK2 in our case, which is our Kubernetes. Once that's done, you have a fully running AI platform. Your GPUs can be used via annotation up on top of Kubernetes, and you're good to go. Now, if we have 100 towns we need to do this in, you probably want Rancher there as well. So you can have every one of those Kubernetes single node Kubernetes clusters imported into Rancher, so you can manage the OS or Kubernetes layer and the apps on top. Once you've got that, if you want to go to install a chatbot, I forgot one piece. There's also the GPU operator after RK2 is installed. So driver, RK2, GPU operator, and then AMD and NVIDIA, you're set to go. Now to do the chatbot, it's 2 Helm charts for SUSE AI. So, one actually, we have a single deployer, but I typically do it 2 because it does a nice stage effect. The vector database takes a bit to do. It's about 12 images. So you stage that, gets on top of your storage, which in my case, in a local machine, you could use local disk. So if you've heard of a CSI, container storage interface, that's the storage backend for Kubernetes. So you can say local path, which uses the spare space on the local disk. And then vector database, of course, is running in memory, but it has all of the stuff backed up on PVCs. So you have that installed. Then you install Open Web UI and VLM or Open Web UI and OLAMA. The easiest is OLAMA for a single node because it's probably going to be low traffic. So you're thinking 1 to 2 users at a time. And then once that's done, as part of the install, you can also choose an LLM. So at that point, you've got a fully running platform. Open Web UI is exposed. That'll talk to OLAMA or VLLM. You'll have the model on top, which you tell it to download as part of the config. And then if you go into Open Web UI into RAG training, it'll actually go through its local training model and push into Milvus, which is the vector database sitting there. So in a recap of these acronyms, it's SLES on bare metal, the driver for the guard, RK2, which is the Kubernetes, the operator for the GPU, then your AI application, which is the chatbot. And if it's multi-node and you want to manage that, you have Rancher sitting on some central cluster managing all the edge sites.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this doesn't take like 3 weeks, right?
I have a record now of doing this with one German customer where they had SLES installed. We got it done in 40 minutes. A POC.
Oh, really?
A POC in 40 minutes, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Now this is on bare metal. Some of
Yeah.
my bigger customers are running Harvester, which is the upstream name for SUSE virtualization or KubeVirt, and they
Yep.
run Harvester across all the nodes, and then they use PCI pass-through and give specific RK2 VMs to the GPUs. So that's another approach that's non-bare metal, but I don't recommend it for single node. It's just a waste of resources.
Yeah. But GPU sharing is fully supported there as well then.
Yeah, and if you buy the NVIDIA AI Enterprise licensing, which is
Yep.
also good, you get it for 3 years free, I think, when you buy like H100s. You get the, I believe, and I may not be correct on this, but my understanding is you get the virtual KVM driver capability from NVIDIA, which is behind the license purchase. And that allows you to cut GPUs up in the hypervisor layer, so in the harvester layer. The other one, which you're probably aware of, is MIG, where you cut them up at
Yep.
the Kubernetes layer. So there's lots of different options depending on mainly if the customer is going to fill up a full GPU or more than one with a model. If their model's like an 8 billion parameter and they want to put it in a 24 gig GPU, they're better off cutting that GPU into 8 gig micro kind of chunks of it, and then giving one of those to the user to put their model on. That way, you're not wasting all that VRAM on a single card. Because if you think about it, Kubernetes doesn't know how much VRAM is in a card. It just knows the type, if it's AMD or NVIDIA, and how many are in the node, and it tries to schedule that GPU resource onto the node with that GPU. I know NVIDIA, from what I've heard, is working on something called dynamic resource allocation, or DRA, and this is where the schedule in Kubernetes is aware of the card type, the number of CUDA cores, and the amount of VRAM, so you can actually see if there's like enough VRAM available in those cards if you're going to kind of use it across multi namespace or multi-user. That's not talking about the security risk of running multiple namespaces in one GPU where they can see each other's memory space, which is another problem. But yeah.
Oh man, that's pretty awesome. To quickly get started. So okay, so now we have infrastructure. You already mentioned that it's very simple to deploy a RAG application with all necessary components. So what are kind of typical use cases that you see at customers where they can really benefit from this platform?
With Olama and OpenWebUI, I'd say the simple projects. Like we're talking 1 to 2 users, 1 GPU, keeping it simple. Those are the chatbot, coding assistants, and also like machine learning. So the GGX system that came out from NVIDIA, that's running Ubuntu with Docker inside, and it's easy to put RK2, or theoretically easy because RK2 runs on ARM, and have the RK2 or the K3S, the Kubernetes in there, use the Docker as the runtime inside Kubernetes. So you reuse all the work NVIDIA did with Ubuntu on the base layer, and of course Rancher and RK2 do support Ubuntu LTS versions and RHEL and CentOS and others underneath. That's one unique thing about SUSE. So if the customers already have that in their infrastructure, they don't have to fully reinstall. In the case of GGX or other kind of edge small footprint, you could go that approach. But that would be one use case, is the simplicity. The other one would be where we get outside of those, which is like distributed training, distributed model serving. And these are usually like customers who are doing HPC as well. For example, one of my customers has 3,500 nodes. Now 500 of them are only for AI, and the same exact servers, 3,000 of them are done with HPE running Slurm, for example. And the theory is that maybe eventually when Slurm becomes supported on Kubernetes and the scheduling actually works, which it doesn't today in a nice way, they'll keep them separate and they'll move chunk of nodes from AI to HPC depending on the demand. So they'll just wipe systems and rebuild them with AI and Kubernetes, or wipe them and turn them back into SLES for HPC. And in those, which is unique, it's very similar to Gracehopper, which are those ARM-based systems. It's Ampere with, for example, AMD Instinct 300 cards. So you can treat it exactly the same way, like we talked about with driver and operator. You're just using an AMD driver and an AMD operator at the end of the day. And SUSE has full ARM support in that stack as well.
So would that mean that a customer could potentially just invest in a single platform, in a kind of a homogeneous platform, but depending on kind of the type of workload they want to land on, they could kind of balance more towards AI or more towards HPC?
100%. And once BMC and Slurm and those tools are Kubernetes ready, which it's been trying to be retooled for like the past 10 years from what I understand, then they can do everything Kubernetes. But today, I haven't seen any customer do the jump to trying to do Slurm on Kubernetes. It's always been on SLES, running Slurm or BMC.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really cool. So that's a really nice use case. Is RAG kind of the only use case that you see, or I can imagine that there are many more possibilities there.
Yeah, let me think about this. So the ones we've sold the most have been GPU as a service. So these are companies that want to use the brand and then build the GPU platform they can resell. And they either resell it on a token base or on a per GPU customer base. And that's pretty simple, right? It's just Kubernetes with the GPU capability exposed inside, and they use quota alignment so that each customer gets a specific quota. If it's token based, they have to use our observability platform or maybe something else they have where you're counting the inference in the token. So again, so we have an observability platform that as long as the AI apps are tooled with open telemetry, they send traces and metrics into our observability platform, and then the operator of the platform can see every question a user asks and every answer they get back from the model. And of course, this is in their environment, and they're air-gapped so that it's fully, sovereign for them. It also counts tokens and sets prices per token for that app or for that user. So they can get across a 1 month period a report on how many tokens that user used, all the Q&A they did with the model. And the same if it was a code assistance, it's the same thing. You're just looking at the inference via open telemetry and capturing that. But I would say another one that I'm seeing start to uptick is customers that need both. They need sovereign AI, but they also need updated models that are whatever for every use case, like let's say Anthropic or something that has a better service than they can build internally. Then they use something like Light LLM or Route LLM. And think of it as like your first API gateway or endpoint, if we're not talking about MCP. They'd go into Light LLM, for example, and it would make a choice, okay, this needs to be routed to SaaS or it needs to be routed to my sovereign piece. And then what you can do is you can actually have everything not air-gapped, but firewalled off in your environment with your developers if it's code assistance, and then Light LLM or Route LLM, those tools can route externally when needed based on a specific criteria being met. MCP were announcing something at GCP, the Google, the NVIDIA event, and KubeCon, another one. I forget the events, but we're announcing
GTC.
Thank you, GTC. Yeah, I'm not going, so I've completely forgotten the acronym by now. I think you're going, right? Are you going to be there?
Yeah.
Of course you're going to be there. Yeah. So you'll probably see my colleagues there, and you'll see that they'll have a MCP announcement, which should be very interesting. I'd recommend going and checking it out. And we're basically trying to build common tooling so that right now it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to MCP. And I know you're asking about use cases. MCP will play a huge role. So right now they're tooling it up that, for example, not doing RAG training to open web UI and that sort of thing, but using I have to be careful not to ruin their splash. But
well, I could explain one of the use cases. It like immediately pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been a VM admin, so a VMware admin for quite a while earlier in my career, and one of the tools that we always used was RV Tools, and that was a kind of a free to download solution that created kind of an instant snapshot of your entire environment. And with snapshot, I don't mean like a virtual machine snapshot, but basically a complete kind of blueprint of everything happening there with like the VMs with all individual settings, your VMware tools versions, and it also showed what was kind of inconsistent when it comes to configurations. Now, taking such a snapshot every week or day or whatever, and kind of checking out if the information is still valid, if stuff has changed, is a great way of managing solutions and your platform. But I can imagine with MCP servers now being available for a lot of different components in your environment, it becomes a lot easier to check out what is actually happening in your infrastructure. on your platform layer within your applications, because MCP servers are becoming kind of the de facto standard when it comes to connectivity to your infrastructure. And now having kind of a model in front of that to retrieve information or to ask questions or to create suggestions on how to upgrade certain parts of your infrastructure, it becomes like an admin's best friend.
Yeah, you're spot on. And that's one of the things SUSE is doing across all the BUs, is they're putting MCP capabilities in all the products. So for example, SLES, if you want to track and maintain what all the SLES environments are doing, if they're tied into like Multi-Linux Manager, which is like the central management of all these systems, you can get feedback on what's happening across the systems based on what's exposed via MCP. And the other products we have are also releasing in next year their own capabilities via MCP. I think what I've seen though is that there's multiple gateway types, multiple servers, and if you try and have like 10 of them, how do you bring them all together like in a single gateway that takes the sprawl and pulls it together? And that's something related to what will be announced at the event. So they're basically, we've built some open source but internal kind of tooling in our Rancher GUI that you'll see at the event, hopefully, that allows you to basically a combination of Langflow and what was been built. You build the whole flow of how those should be connected, and then it pulls them together. And then you also have a full catalog of everything that you want to have exposed. So you can go in and say, okay, I'm going to be using OpenAI, Olama, VLM, what was the other one? Grok, and a bunch of other things. And then everything else that's native will be either enabled or disabled by the user. But outside of that, that's what I've seen in the demo. And I think that'll apply to a lot of use cases. And whoever's done MCP work already, they'll probably realize there's so many options out there that it's good to start putting a fence around what corporately will be supported by the infrastructure team that'll be, supporting that. So let's see.
Yeah. And I think this is also a great segue into kind of the final topic I wanted to talk to you about. SUSE is a European company. And at this side of the pond, we're seeing and we're hearing more and more people talk about sovereignty and the challenging with the geopolitics and using open source technologies. And this is kind of where the roots of SUSE are. But this is also one of the focus areas of SUSE, right?
Absolutely.
So what can you kind of talk about when it comes to SUSE's strategy on the topic of sovereignty?
Yeah, I think every company has their own angle on sovereignty because every company needs to have an angle on that, right? But as an American living in Europe for 15 years, I kind of have a special perspective. I'm glad I'm over here right now. It's a nice place to be. And I have to say that for SUSE, we see customers want to feel safe with what they're purchasing, in the sense that there's lower risk. That could be things like that they have access to the code and there's never going to be a disruption in that. They have access to support and there's never disruption in that. So what SUSE has offered specifically for the European areas, we have sovereign support as well. So if a customer wants to buy from SUSE, being a German company, European Union based, they can of course acquire it through their normal channel. If they want their support to also be European based people, so that there's no risk to, let's say communication drops between Europe and India or Europe and the US, any external country outside the EU, then your support's not disrupted because everyone who's on your support framework will be European based. The thing that I think is going to be interesting is that in a couple of years from now, if things change, this is going to quiet down and everyone's going to, think, okay, the world's stabilizing. But if things don't change in a couple of years and it gets even more of a stronger topic about having products you can get from local country and not losing access to it, I would say I'd have one recommendation for customers. I would say play the long game, find out what commercially fits for you. Don't take commercial risks because you think short term something's going to block you, but also look at the cost companies like SUSE that are going out of their way to provide that sound approach to, you can get it from anywhere like normal, or you can even get it locally if a couple years you want to use local sovereign support, and then you kick back to normal support after things settle down. Could be a good way to do risk mitigation.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, Eric. And I think, when it comes to being a European company and being so innovative as SUSE is right now, I really like the approach that you guys have when it comes to the MCP servers, the simple deployment, and I think this is going to be an exciting time. Let's hop on to experiment number 3, the lab report, when we kind of, wrap up the episode, but also have a really fun question for you. So, how I like to kind of do this is have kind of a mutual wrap up. Like, what is it that we kind of learned in the deep dive? So first of all, if it's up to me, I think the deployment of SUSE and SUSE AI is extremely simple.
40 minutes.
And quick.
Wait, I also have a question for you, Johan.
Oh, yeah.
What was the most funniest or embarrassing AI thing that happened to you so far?
Ooh.
And it could be dog related as well. You never know.
Well, it's not dog related yet.
Okay.
Although, fun story. My employer ITQ, and I need to say that this podcast is not created on behalf of ITQ. So this is my own podcast, it's my own view. But in the field of I work in the field of AI. I'm the AI lead at ITQ, and we bought a robot dog. And it's not the Spot, the Boston Dynamics Spot, which I really liked, and I saw it at a customer, and we got to play around a little bit with it, and it was amazing. But it also cost $75K, and
That's one
it's insanely expensive. But it is also like really well built. You can actually, I saw a video, I don't know, a year ago or 2 years ago, someone really hitting the dog by kicking it, and it still remained stable, and so it's really it's really good. But there's also a couple of companies that build kind of Chinese companies mostly build alternatives that are a lot cheaper and are, I felt, on the Unitree G2, and that dog has been used by the World Championship athletics, I think 2 years ago in China, where you have javelin. So with javelin, they throw the spears, and for a while, I always saw like remote controlled cars driving the spears back to the athletes, and at that World Championship, you saw actually the robotic dog picking up the spears and walking them back to the athletes. So
fetch.
so they looked amazing. So we bought one, and the whole idea is to buy a real robotic dog with AI capabilities, the whole shebang. So the website stated this is the AI dog. It's infested with AI. It's AI blah blah blah. And we unboxed it, and it has a voice assistant on it, and that's it. So you basically can ask Ben, which it's called, like, hey, Ben, and it says, hey, and then we have no idea how to like add commands to it or let it do something, because it simply does not work.
You didn't try Mandarin?
Yeah, no, but that we should have done that probably. But here's kind of the almost fail. The version that we bought, it already cost like $6K. It has LiDAR, but it has a 180-degree view to the front. So it does not know what happens at the back. And we wanted to kind of enhance the dog with hand gesture recognition, and in return of a recognized gesture, do a trick. So what we eventually did is created our own API that talks to the dog. We created a transcoder that kind of transcode the video feed of the dog into something that is readable by an AI solution, which we built based on YOLO, a framework called YOLO, which actually means you only look once. And I trained a model on recognizing both hands as well as gestures, and it works. Like we currently run that on a Kubernetes node with a GPU attached, and we can basically show it hand gestures and return it does a couple of tricks. One of those tricks is a front flip, and we were at an event 2 weeks ago where we showcased the dog, and I think during the day I did roughly somewhere around 65 to 70 demos.
Cool.
And a couple of our sales folks, saw the demos. They also were kind of excited, and they wanted to do the demos as well. So you basically kneel down, you show a hand gesture, and then the dog does a trick. But the simple trick is just thumbs up. Mm-hmm. A thumbs up means it says hello, it waves its front right leg, and that's it. But he wanted to showcase the party trick as well, and it for some reason it didn't work. So he moved over, and then a potential customer kneeled in front of the dog to do the same thing.
Oh, no.
And one of the things that we built is a dashboard that shows the recognized hand gestures. And to avoid that the dog goes berserk, we kind of created a fail-safe that it needs to at least see 30 frames in a sequence with the same recognized gesture. Mm-hmm. And the video feed is roughly 30 frames a second. So, it needs to kind of see it a full second consecutively to be able to do that. And we created kind of a pipeline with all of the recognized gestures. And then the guy was in front of the dog, and he showed at first his thumb, and then the sales guy said, no, you also need to do a thumbs down, because then it'll do the front flip. And I was just barely in time, because when you kind of talk to the dog like we do using WebRTC, LiDAR is being disabled, and it does not know if anything happens in front of it. So it'll just do the trick. And the guy was just, like I am in front of the mic. He was, 20 centimeters in front of the dog. And the dog, the motors in the dog have so much torque that it can easily move over a complete table or multiple bar stools. Like we have them in the office. And it just, by walking back, it moved over a complete table. So it is really strong. And I was just in time to pull over the guy, pull back the guy. Otherwise, he would ended up definitely with a black eye or worse. So that was one of my definitely recent fails when it comes to a dog. And I already got an invite to bring the dog to SUSECon
awesome.
Early next year in Prague, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Yeah.
Prague or in Poland somewhere, but somewhere in Czech or
Prague or Budapest, one of the two. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a ton of fun. We'll bring the dog, and we'll also show how we can simply run it on SUSE AI, for instance, because we made it multi-platform capable. And I'm actually at this moment working on, as part of the podcast, as part of kind of the thing that I'm doing, building a lab with different types of solutions, and kind of see how we can simply deploy the solution for customers as well. So it's kind of part of the whole thing.
That would be so cool to see a dog in the rancher GUI.
Oh man, it's gonna be a ton of fun.
Nice. I guess now's the time to start an insurance company for home assistance robotics that could potentially injure you.
Yeah, if you want to make money, that's definitely the way to go.
That's cool.
Yeah, but kind of coming back to the lab report, saying yeah. So one thing we learned definitely is that it's fairly simple to deploy. It's continuously under development.
Yep. The industry's moving fast. Whoever doesn't keep up with what's changing is going to be sitting on, let's say, technical debt with customers. So you really do have to stay ahead, in my view.
And I would say that the final thing is definitely around the sovereignty aspect or sovereignty aspect of SUSE. Are you kind of seeing that moving in a certain direction, or is that also kind of being determined based on whatever happens in the world?
Yeah, and I just preface this that all the sovereignty stuff I've mentioned is my own interpretation, so I don't want to speak for SUSE, of course. I do have ex-colleagues I've been talking with about this because it's a big topic and getting their view. And a lot of companies outside of Europe, and the one I specifically talked to, is seeing an impact on their commercial pipeline because of kind of customers trying to de-risk, at least in Europe, right? So this doesn't impact probably APAC or Americas right now, and maybe it does in a different way. Being in Europe, I've only seen my hyper focus. But the companies that are based outside of Europe that are other options, they are seeing impact. Maybe not a big one, but for those, especially in the public sector or others that are being told they have to see if they can procure locally first before externally, I think those are the ones that we're seeing, of course, the most from.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Eric, first of all, thanks so much for being a guest on the very first episode of the Private AI Lab. Before I ask you the final question, if people want to follow you or get to know more about the stuff that you're doing or about SUSE AI, what should I do?
LinkedIn, or just search for my last name.de.
Ooh. I'll definitely leave since your surname is quite challenging to
let's not even
kind of find out. Yeah. I'll definitely leave a link to the show notes. So what I want to do is end every single episode with the following question. So hypothetically, there will be a big chance that I'll invite you over again, being a guest, and that might happen, in the next 12 months or so. So the question I have is, the next 12 months will likely see a surge in AI deployments in the edge. We'll see a lot of stuff happening. So what's your kind of prediction when it comes to AI in the next 12 months?
Ooh, do I go doom and gloom or do I go everything's pretty? I suspect we're starting to hit, my interpretation, we're starting to hit the top of that curve, right? And all of the stuff that people are thinking AI can solve or AI is going to take my job away, I think the reality is starting to become common sense for the general public. Of course, everyone who does data science, they know what they do with it. They know it's capable of. Who knows what governments have for their own capabilities behind closed doors with huge data centers, and maybe it's even far beyond. But I suspect the general usage of AI is going to become commonplace. People are going to get more comfortable with it. And more companies are going to put rules in that stipulate what you're allowed to do with the public version and what you need to do on-prem. And I think a lot of companies are going to realize that the shadow AI approach or shadow chatbot, or what we're going to call the shadow IT equivalent of using AI, not through a corporate kind of approved approach, but like, for example, code assistants and other documents done through OpenAI, that's going to slowly get kind of merged into corporate policy. It's kind of like the AI Act and stuff. It took a while to get into effect, and then it's in effect this year, and companies are adjusting. I think those per company policies are going to happen, which means that there's going to be a more common approach across many companies about how they want to do AI. All the CXOs are going to talk to each other. They're going to figure out what each other are doing and copy that kind of approach to be kind of fast in solving the problem. 12 months from now, I see at least the major top 500 companies having an exact policy on how AI can be used with consequences and directions, and having the head of infrastructure, for example, have the right infrastructure in place to do what they're dictating needs to happen. Because you can't tell users you're not allowed to use OpenAI, for example, but then not provide them the alternative that adheres to the corporate policy, right? So that's what I see. I think the amount of lead time when you go to Dell and HP and those others to get the hardware that you need to have that in place is going to be the biggest challenge for those companies. So in 12 months, I think having MCP-based data sources with local chat equivalent, and then anything else that the users need to interface with, all API-based, of course. Eddie, my dog, decided to come in and say hi. Come on, Eddie. You want to say hi? Yeah. There we go.
Hey.
He's almost a year. This is him coming in and say it's time for bed. Let's go.
Oh, does he talk German?
What, do you talk German, Eddie? Huh? No? Yeah, he says it's time for bed. Yeah, he's a snuggler.
And for the people who are listening, not viewing, that was not a German Shepherd.
That's a golden retriever.
Oh, is it?
And this is the normal color you get in America, actually.
Ah.
Yeah, they're a little bit darker than the European ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I see a lot of companies adjusting fully in the next 12 months, which means more on-prem or more rules blocking people, which isn't going to solve it, but maybe the smaller ones won't have a budget to buy 2-3 million in hardware to make the greenfield deployment, but they may just say you're not allowed to do it. And then from a technology standpoint, I think we're going to hopefully see more players in the field. I hear Huawei coming up in Europe quite a bit. So especially if you can't count Middle East as Europe, which my company does, it's going to be big. So I think Huawei is going to come in and try and take a chunk of the pie on the GPU side or TPU side. I see AMD, like Linpack testing. A lot of my customers that are large, they try and do Linpack testing to see who's got the biggest arm in the game, right? And the top 2 in that list I saw yesterday are all AMD based, which is surprising, right? Because most customers are using NVIDIA. So I think there's going to be some turf wars when it comes to that. And I'm guessing and hoping the US restricts or removes some of the restriction about, the global sales of the GPUs from the US being Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. And maybe things will kind of neutralize and become common, but I think there's going to be a shift in who's the biggest player in the next 12 months. Not a major shift, but there's going to be some external pressures that geopolitically may or may not happen.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll definitely invite you over in the next 12 months and see if you were right. So thanks again for being a guest.
Thank you.
We'll definitely talk soon.
Thanks, Johan. Good to talk to you again. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Private AI Lab. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, or visit johan.ml for more insights and experiments. For now, experiment complete. Until the next one, stay curious.
Private AI Lab.